Hey guys, you're on a scripted channel, and here we try to make sense of AI. We try to understand AI. Today is a special day, and this is a special video. We are approaching 10,000 milestones, so there are about 10,000 of us now, which is, well, a great thing. And we thought, hey, this is a special moment, and we need to celebrate it. We need to do something special. So here it is, this video. And today we will talk about books. Yeah. But not just random books. We're going to talk about books that help understand AI. And I can already see some of you like, hey, damn it, again, there's going to be formulas everywhere and things like charts and like this complex hardware, software stuff. No, it's going to be very simple. And I promise there's going to be not a single formula in the whole video. I'm not going to even say the word backpropagation. Damn it, I think I just said it again, right? Backpropagation. All right, no more backpropagations, 100%, I guarantee. The books that we will talk about today, they're going to be basically from my personal experience, how I was learning them, how I was finding them. So this is basically my personal story of how I came across the books that later turned to be valuable for the AI journey. And before we start, I just want to say that this is an experimental format for us, so we haven't done anything like this before. So I would not expect things to be as smooth as they usually are. Well, some of you probably saying like, hey, dude, your movies are never smooth, which is probably true. But this time it may be even less smooth. For example, as you probably hear, there is also, we're filming now in Australia, and there is a storm going on right now outside, just 2 meters away from me. And well, this is Australia. What are you going to do? If you survive here, it's already an achievement, which is good. All right, so let's start. And our first book will be, for today, will be Garrison, Stainless Rat. This is a story about a quite charming con man who is doing things that are not all of them are socially approved by society, and he's doing this in not so distant future, in somewhere in the intergalaxy. This is a great story, and for me it was the first time I came across science fiction, like actual science fiction, not like a Soviet science fiction, but, well, although I have to say that Soviet science fiction can be really good as well. But I came across a prohibited science fiction. And that book, the way how I actually got into my hands was quite interesting. I was grade 3 or grade 4, year 3, year 4, basically like 10 years old. And I was walking on just a street market, and somebody literally almost like psst, psst, heroes, I got books. And I got this book, Garrison, Stainless Rat. So that book taught me about two things. The first one was that was the first time I realized that the future that we have, the future may be interesting and fun. And all these robots in the book, in the futuristic environment, that's probably how I first got the nudge into this area. And the second lessons that I learned was the book was forbidden, right? You couldn't really legally have that book, and that's how I learned that the best way to motivate somebody to do something is actually to prohibit that thing. It works very well. It actually very well works with kids. For example, if you want the kids to do something, the best way how you can do it is actually you just say like, hey, don't even dare do this. For example, if you want to make them read the books, so you'll say like, hey, you see those books? Never ever even touch them. Don't even think about reading them. And the next thing that they will do is you will find them in a basement or in an attic somewhere, and they will be reading them one after another. So that's Garrison, Stainless Rat. And our next book is Philip Dick. Android. Do androids dream of electric sheep? We have this book here. When I read this book for the first time, it blew my mind. And this is a book that the Blade Runner is based on, the movie. Philip Dick spent his entire life researching one simple question. Where's the line between artificial and real? And that's what this story is about. That scene in this book where a protagonist, second protagonist, Rachel, when she learns that she is not a human, that she is an android, the power of that scene, it literally turns the world upside down. In our day-to-day work, when we deal with neural networks, I cannot help but to roll forward in time. Let's say 5 years, 10 years from now. And it is pretty certain that that's going to be a moment where the line between what we now call artificial intelligence and neural networks and the natural intelligence, that line, it's not going to be obvious. This is going to be blurred. So what is real and what is not? So that's what this story is about. Highly recommend. Our next book is Solaris, Stanislav Lem. I have it here too. I don't have it on paper. I usually prefer books on paper. But in this case, we will have to deal with this. Solaris. Stanislav Lem, he is a Polish writer. And again, present tense, the writers of such caliber, they always with us, they never die. So Stanislav Lem, he created this science fiction story. And the story is basically about a human visiting a planet, and the planet was self-conscious, and the planet was actually could read human mind, and it was like a mirror. So the human could see himself in that mirror. It's an absolutely mind-blowing story. There have been a few movies filmed based on this story, on this book, including one by Tarkovsky, and there was also George Clooney in one of the movies, in another movie. But neither of the movies is really good, to be honest. Somehow this story is very difficult to put on a screen. That being said, the story itself is amazing. There is only one example how this story that I'm aware of, how this story was properly digitized. There's an audiobook that is an absolute masterpiece. Unfortunately, this audiobook is in Russian. But if you happen to speak Russian, here's a link. Highly recommend. The reason why Solaris is so important is because it is actually the story of how a human was observing himself in a mirror that was actually in another mind. And that's pretty much the same story with AI. AI is quickly becoming a mirror for us, for humans. If we look at it, for example, at Geoffrey Hinton, the creator of the First Contact, he basically spent his entire life building neural networks, deep learning tools based on the way how the human brain is organized, is created. So he was replicating human brain to create an artificial brain. And eventually he succeeded. Pretty much all modern AI is based on his invention. It's a replica. However, what we begin to see is that the patterns that we see in AI, because it was created based on the same principle as our brain functions, we begin to understand things that about ourselves that we cannot see ourselves. We can see them in AI. And this is how we understand ourselves. This is one of those ancient questions. Can the knife cut itself? Can the mirror see itself? Can the word understand itself? AI becomes a mirror for us, and Solaris was the first glimpse into how that works. Highly recommend. Our next movie is Roadside Picnic by brothers Strugatsky, the Russian science fiction writers. I've got the book here. Second, here we go. This is the same story that Stalker movie is based on, the Stalker movie by Tarkovsky, and the famous computer game Stalker as well. So that's a story. I read the book maybe 20-25 times. I watched the movie 20-25 times. And this is one of those cases where you read through the story. Each time you read through the story, you find new layers. It's layers and layers of meaning. And I, even after reading and watching that story so many times, I still feel that there are layers there that I have not discovered yet. It's amazing how much hidden meaning you can conceal in a short story like this, in a small book like this. If you ask my personal opinion, I believe that this is probably one, if we talk about the movie, this is probably one of the best science fiction movies ever made. And there is an interesting story behind how it was made, and I want to share it here. When Tarkovsky was filming this movie, he did it in somewhere in Middle Asia. I think it was in Uzbekistan. And an earthquake destroyed the whole city. And it was like a year and a half after they started filming. So the earthquake destroyed the whole city. They had to find a new place to film the movie. On top of that, they discovered that the film itself, it had a defect, which basically meant that the whole year and a half of work was wasted. It could not be used. But that's not the worst part. And by the way, they also were running out of budget. But again, this was not the worst part. The worst part was that Tarkovsky realized that the story did not add up, didn't work. It worked well in the book, on paper, but on the screen it did not work. The good thing is that he was a friend with Strugatsky, with the authors, with the writers. And he called them and they came to him and they had a few sleepless nights discussing, trying to understand why it doesn't work. And they realized that the reason why it doesn't work is that the main character, the protagonist, was like a brutal thug, a brutal guy. And it worked in the book, but it did not work on the screen. And they realized that they need to change it to some sort of almost like a saint, almost like a Jesus. The problem was that the main character, Kaidanovsky, he was famous for brutal roles. He was a brutal, masculine man. And in the morning, after those sleepless nights, when they came to him and they said like, hey, you know what? Yeah, we know that we need this, some subtle change in your role. You're not a thug anymore. You're a saint, like almost a Jesus. Kandianovsky, he wrote it in a few of his interviews after that. So he had to change, and he did. And that has become one of the best movies ever made. Well, science fiction movies ever made. A great story and a great movie. Our next book is Influence by Professor Cialdini. Here's the book, we have it here. Influence. So this is probably, not probably, but definitely is the most influential books that I ever read. Here's how I actually got this book, because this is quite a story. I was walking on the snowy streets of Toronto somewhere in 2008. And you know how they sometimes, when people don't need books, they just throw them onto the pavement, onto the street walk. And this is what happened. I was just walking there and I saw a book lying in the snow on the pavement. I picked it up and the book said Influence. And that has become probably the most important thing I've ever made in my life. I picked it up, this book. This book is about how our brain does what it does, how it makes decisions. And we probably would need weeks and weeks of video time just to go through this book. It's gold. But if we boil it down, our brains have some sort of shortcuts. Let's use this example. The example of turkeys, because that's just the main examples that this book uses. Turkeys, they have chicks. And chicks have a specific sound. Let's call it like beep, beep, beep. And when turkey, like parent turkey, hears a sound, it is doing just one thing. It is feeding that chick. And that reaction is automatic. It happens automatically. It was created by millions and millions of years of evolution. So it's automatic reaction. And the funny thing is that you don't really need to be a chick to create the sound to be fed. You just create that sound. Anything can create that sound, even human. And turkey will feed that, whatever that creates that sound. It's automatic reaction. And our brain works the same way, human brains. And this is what this book is about, is how this type of automatic reactions are wired in our brain. The funny part is that AI is basically some sort of a replica of a human brain. And the same principle works for AI too. Basically, you create cheep, 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 or beep, beep, beep sound, and AI will feed you. So-called model poisoning. So it is not just about the influence, not just about a human brain, but about AI brain as well. Extremely powerful book. All right, here comes our next book. It is, here it is, Seeking Wisdom from Peter B. Levin. Although, to be honest, I don't think that this person actually exists. Do you remember the Influence book, the previous one? So the Influence book, it was explaining how our brains basically make decisions. So this book is similar, but it is on steroids. Seeking Wisdom. This book is very difficult, very hard to find. At least back then, it was just only one website, obscure website, where you could buy this book. So you actually need to know what you're looking for. I think it was never advertised. And the truth is that this book was written by not Peter B. Levin, but by Charlie Munger and Warren Buffett. So it turned out that the last, 70 years, they spent collecting ideas. And this book is a result of the ideas that they collected. They were collecting ideas of from all sorts of fields, and the only requirement that they had is that the idea should work. As long as the idea worked, it was good for this book. And it just so happened that the majority of these ideas are about human misjudgment, about the way how our brain makes wrong decisions. And amazingly, the same rules, they apply not only to organic brains, they very much apply to artificial brains as well, artificial neural networks. So let's take a look. Here, one of the largest parts of the book is basically called Psychology of Misjudgments. Then an equally big part of the book is called Physics and Mathematics of Misjudgments. So basically this entire thing, this is about AI, it's applicable to AI. And it's extremely dense. And I'm going to use just a few concepts that actually work very well with AI. I will pick something like the simplest things that actually work. Here, for example, number 13. Over-influenced by vivid or the most recent information. In humans, it works this way. For example, insurance companies use this very often. For example, we had a flood last month, and that means that next month they're going to be pretty much everybody will go to insurance companies and will buy excessive insurance for flood insurance, and they may ignore the fire insurance. Although it doesn't necessarily mean that the fact that just recently you had a flood, it doesn't mean that the flood risk in the future increased, especially relative to fire. Nevertheless, people do this biased decision, and they think that what happened just recently, most recently, is more likely to occur in the future because it's the most vivid experience and memory. AI models, LLM models, work exactly the same way. If you look at the way how the architecture in the current typical LLM models works, is that the context window is designed in a way that the most recent memories, the most recent tokens, they actually get a higher weights. So whatever's after that, or especially in between of the context window, it's actually the LLM model pays, well, we can call it this way, pays much less attention to it. So it is very much like a human behavior as well. This is just one example. This book is full of them. Highly recommend. Our next book is even more interesting. Let me find it. Oh, here we go. Deep Simplicity. Bringing order to chaos and complexity. I'm not going to go too deep into this book because it is extremely deep. But if you boil it down, a very simple principle that it has, the very simple idea that it's trying to deliver, is that almost everything around us can be simplified to very straightforward and even primitive form. The way how the book usually uses is basically fractals. So almost everything can be derived to a fractal. It's a lot to digest. It's not an easy reading, and it's almost like a philosophical reading. But once you understand the concept of it, you can apply, it is applicable to AI and LLM models and neural networks in general, because if you look at it, neural network in its core is a very simple thing. There is no real complexity in it. It is a simple structure, a simple mechanism, and yet it is able to comprehend and understand and include into it almost everything every single concept around our world, no matter how complex that concept is. So it's basically what LLM is doing, is just boils down the complexity of what seems on the surface as chaos, and is able to distill it into very simple and manageable forms. This is what LLM is doing, not LLM, just overall deep learning models. Again, this is not a easy reading. It takes a lot of determination, but I highly recommend it if you want to look at the AI from a different perspective. Here comes our next book. Where are you? Here we go. Blind Watchmaker, Richard Dawkins. And we also have his Selfish Gene. By the way, you probably noticed that all the books, many of the books look like new. The reason of it is just my original books, they all got stuck in Moscow for understandable reason. So actually I had to buy new versions. They all basically, all the notes and all side notes, they're all there. They're still in Moscow. Well, we have to deal with the cards we're given. You probably heard a lot about Selfish Gene, but in my personal opinion is a blind watchmaker is probably even stronger than the Selfish Gene. So we're gonna put the Selfish Gene aside for today. Blind Watchmaker. If you boil it down, the one simple message that Richard Dawkins is trying to send to us is that the way how the evolution works is extremely primitive. So it's the next step in explaining the Darwin's theory. You can think of it, basically just the name of the book says it all. You can think of evolution of the world as if it's just a watchmaker, blind, doesn't care what he creates, he just assembles. If it works, well, good, go ahead. So it creates, it builds it makes watches and just sends them out into the open world, and if they survive, good. As simple as that. And this is pretty much the same way how neural networks work as well. And overall, the neural network, if you look at it from this perspective, is just another step of the evolutionary process. This is just another step of another creation of the watchmaker. That's it. Again, highly recommend. It is fairly easy to read. I don't think there are many formulas in it, so you're gonna enjoy it. And our next book is this one, The Romance of Three Kingdoms, 三国演义. This is probably one of the most fascinating stories you can find. This is a story of a period of Chinese time when Han Dynasty was falling apart, and different interesting characters were appearing out of nowhere. And that's where the Three Kingdoms, where they appeared as well. That happened in 3rd century AD, so it is about 1800 years ago, or roughly 90 generations ago. This is how I like to measure like ancient history. You just measure it in generations. So it's 90 people between us and that time. So this story is about, basically, you're probably asking like, hey, why is that even relevant to AI? This book, this story, is one of the first accounts of written accounts of where you can see humans acting. it's a true story. Well, most of it. There are some parts of it that were created later on, and basically that are not real, but the core of the story is real. And this is basically a story about real people that did exist. Liu Bei, Xuan Di, or treacherous Cao Cao. You can learn a lot from them. But the reason I brought them here is because what this book tells you, it shows you the human nature of 90 generations ago. And the amazing thing is that it's actually the same human nature. It's the same people. Because somehow we tend to discount the ancient people. We think that they are primitive, they were barbarians. We think we basically are much more advanced than they are. No, we're not. One of the takeaways from the book is that the human nature, those people, they were in no way less intelligent than we are, maybe even more intelligent than we are. And here's what it means. It seems like human nature is a substance, it is something that is extremely resilient. And it is passing itself through time. And what is happening now is that we are creating AI as a replica of ourselves. And what we do is we actually copy-paste the same, whatever that is, the human nature. We paste it, we push it into the AI. So that substance, which we call human nature, it is extremely resilient. And it is finding ways to propel itself into the future. You hear the storm? Yeah, it's like, yes, we are going to the future. So human nature, it's a book about human nature. And talking about human nature, here's our next book. And here comes our next book. Where are you? Yeah, right here. Thucydides, A History of Peloponnesian Wars. Here you may ask, why this? A relic like this? And well, the story is fairly simple, fairly similar to what we saw in Three Kingdoms in Sanguo Yuanyi. It's one of the first accounts, probably the first reliable account of human decisions, of how people were making human decisions. And it is written by an absolute genius, Thucydides. If you read through this book, and this is 5th century BC, so this is 800 years before even Sanguo Yuanyi. So when you read this book, you see that these people, they were in no way inferior to us. They were, the level of sophistication of their decision-making process is absolutely astonishing. These are not primitive people, in no way. Human nature did not change since then. The human nature is pushing itself through all these layers of time, all these centuries. It is propelling itself from the past into the future. And now we give the same nature, the same human nature to AI. Because again, AI, we created as our own replica. So these were the 10 books that I believe give us some interesting aspect, interesting point of view when we look at AI. And well, they can be helpful if we want to to create a better AI, or if we want to predict the direction, the destination where this whole development is going to. If you like this new format of video, we plan to make this type of videos every 10,000 milestones. So each time we reach a next milestone, we'll create something similar. So if you like this type of format, what you can do to make the next video sooner is you could recommend this video to people whom you think may like it, some of your friends, or maybe a forum where you frequent, and a forum with like-minded people who might enjoy this type of content. Again, just share it. Okay, thank you. It was a pleasure. Cheers.